All right, everybody. So today on the podcast, we have GVS, Jeffrey Verity Schofield, back on, and new guest, Daniel from Fitness FAQs. So, Daniel, I think people on the podcast or who are listeners of the podcast are very familiar with Jeff. Now, you obviously have a huge following online, but people who listen to my channel may not be as familiar with your channel. So, can you give some of your background to everybody?
Yeah, sure. I'm currently 32 years old. I've been training since I was 17, the calisthenics background. So I got into working out with absolute bare bones equipment, just going to a local park, using the pull-up station, dip bars, push-ups. And that might be why your audience is unfamiliar with my work because when we get in these echo chambers, we're only the bodybuilder, we're only the calisthenics person. But for curious minds that are listening to a podcast like this, after a while, you want to evolve and just expand your knowledge because you know that any one domain of fitness isn't perfect in and of itself. The person doing calisthenics is missing out on some weak links with free weights. The bodybuilder's missing out on perhaps some absolute strength principles that they can get from someone in powerlifting. So I guess that embodies my philosophy is as much as I enjoy doing calisthenics, I have an appreciation for all forms of human movement, fitness, physiology. I'm just a geek on it, man. I'm a meathead and also a geek at the same time. So I've got a background in exercise science and also physiotherapy. Been doing calisthenics for a minute. Recently introduced bodybuilding into my routine maybe 3 to 4 years ago. And I just love the mix of combining the bodyweight mastery with the finishing touches of aesthetics that you get from bodybuilding. I think especially as you get to a more advanced natural state, you train for say 10 years consistently. And when I say advanced, this isn't, you know, just training for 10 years makes you advanced. It's diligently keeping a logbook, trying to progress. And then you get to this point, this ceiling where you have to make a decision. Do you want to keep going all in on one capacity for the diminishing returns associated with that? Or do you want to start to expand your repertoire and maybe dabble in some different disciplines to get those beginner gains and keep training fun?
Yeah, I think that's awesome, man. I know Jeff and I have, very similar philosophies and whatnot with training. I'd say the biggest difference between Jeff and myself is I'm more of like, you're gonna have to turn over all those rocks, and Jeff just thinks it's all genetics. But other than that, we're pretty much on the same page there. I'm curious, you're in Australia, right?
Yeah, Melbourne, Victoria. So if there's any beasts out there that want to collab, my studio's open. So waiting for Jeff to make the trip down, put some pressure on this guy. We'll do some sets here too.
Yeah, yeah. So for people listening, I'm on the East Coast of the United States, so it's 9:17 p.m. For Jeff, it's 9:17 a.m., right? In
Yeah,
China.
and here it's 2 hours ahead of Jeff, so 11:18 a.m.
Right, so we're making it work, which is cool. So I'm very interested actually to talk to you about the calisthenics stuff because my background is I've studied it formally. That was my degree in undergrad. But when you've been in the space for at this point like 20 years, that's really where you get most of the knowledge, especially if you're interested like us to like really dive into a lot of this stuff. And it was mostly from the bodybuilding standpoint. Dabbled with powerlifting, focused on one rep maxes, but never competed with it. But it's always really been, how can I look my best and, get bigger and whatnot. But in the last year or so, I've kind of decided to live that more like lean life. And whereas with powerlifting, you're incentivized to get heavier and higher body fats and whatnot. With calisthenics, it's the exact opposite. And I just thought like, okay, so I'm 33. I don't really want to be incentivized to be bigger and frankly fatter. And really, the leaner you get, the easier some of these calisthenic skills become. And so nowadays, I'm kind of hovering around like 10 or 11% body fat. And I'm just kind of beginning the calisthenics journey. And I'll also kind of tap into your like PT background a little bit later on because I've noticed some issues from that standpoint doing more calisthenics. But I'm interested just to kind of hear your standpoint from I guess an implementation for somebody who's still interested in physique. Are you one who thinks, hey, you know what, calisthenics is going to be able to get you almost all the way there? Or is it like, hey, this is a good base, but then you're really going to have to start picking up, more traditional bodybuilding?
So great question. Multifaceted with your transition to this as more of a Jeff's favorite word again, main gaining maintenance. Once you've, got to a point of satisfaction with your physique and you want to I guess, celebrate it and explore different things. I think calisthenics is a great option for that. As you said, when you are leaner, feels easier, man. It's almost reverse progressive overload. As you get leaner, you get stronger, which is completely opposite to what happens in bodybuilding when you're on a cut. It's really difficult to maintain your strength on your weights across the board. With regard to can you build the most amount of a muscle naturally with just calisthenics, you're not going to tap into your full potential because we're predominantly doing compound movements, pull-ups, dips, handstand push-ups, all those things. And you're going to exhaust the prime movers, but you're never going to fully exhaust the other areas, such as your biceps, triceps, which you're going to get from isolation. Jeff's flex there just indicates the merit of weights and the subpar level of calisthenics for that goal, which is true. You'll get awesome gains. I'd say for the average person, you're going to be such an outlier in terms of your physique development if only did calisthenics. But if you want to compete with the elite bodybuilders, obviously you're going to look small by comparison to them. It just depends on what comparison uh, group that you're going with in terms of your physique development. But yeah, I feel that with calisthenics, there is so much potential, and it just comes to an understanding of your exercise options. So you got to know all the different compounds that you can do, the ones that are best for building muscle. And if you want to plug the gaps in your physique, yes, you can do isolation for certain muscle groups with bodyweight exercises, such as with rings. But if you wanted to just simplify it, you could go key compound lifts, upper body for calisthenics, sprinkle in some isolation with weights, and then you will have the best of both worlds.
And Jeff, I think I bought rings in part because of you. You and Alex Leonidas had kind of turned me on to the idea of them. I've implemented them a little bit, and I'll kind of go into like why specifically. But would you give a similar answer to Daniel in terms of the utility of calisthenics from a physique standpoint?
Yeah, I would say very, very similar in terms of my views. There are definitely some muscle groups where calisthenics are more viable than others. I mean, for the lats and the teres, I mean, training with Daniel, he was stronger than me at a lot of the movements that I had been doing because he just had that carryover from doing lots and lots and lots of pull-ups and rowing variations. So we were doing a seated row. He was stronger than me. We were doing a hammer pull down. He was stronger than me. And so I think calisthenics, it's really, really good for some muscles. But for lower body, you can do your Nordic hamstring curls. Those are really good. You can do your reverse Nordics. Those are okay. Maybe some sissy squats. But you're not going to maximize your lower body development just through body weight, right? When you have people repping 400 or 500 pounds in the squat, it's just really hard to replicate that stimulus through, I mean, what are you going to do? A one-legged sissy squat or something? It's really hard to get that much tension and that much stimulus on the muscle. Same for maybe spinal erectors. I mean, if you're RDLing 350 or 400 pounds, it's just really hard to put that much stress on the core through some body weight movement and on the erectors. So, and then calves as well. I mean, there's a lot of muscle groups where it's just not good for. But I would say for the chest, for the lats, for the delts, I am a big fan of pelican curls, actually. I
Nice.
know you've done a video on, I actually watched your video from way, way back in the day on pelican curls. And I really, really like them. That big, big, big stretch behind the body. And they feel really, really smooth as well. So I'm a big fan of rings. They have a lot of utility, super convenient. I will probably start taking them to the gym. When you're more advanced, you kind of look at your physique, and sometimes you look back and you think, was this area bigger actually a year or two ago? And that the chest was one area where I look back at some areas in 2022 and I think, man, my chest was looking really full. And I realized that was just after I'd been doing rings only training because of lockdowns here,
Mm.
here in China. So it was for a while. And so I've been doing rings turned out, push-ups and RTO dips and stuff like that. And I'll probably start taking my rings to the gym, even if it's not super convenient, just because those movements are S tier.
I think one of the merit there of the rings as well, Jeff, is that it allows you to get that deep stretch pain-free because that could be a separating aspect of you're doing a similar movement pattern with weight, say a barbell, but it just might irritate your joints. The biggest comparison you can make is the dumbbells probably equivalent to the rings in terms of free weight to calisthenics as a substitute. And just to give a little bit of clarification on that Pelican curl, it's equivalent to the incline curl at the gym. If you look at the relative arm position to the torso, it's stretch mediated in that, or stretch focused in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like when I think about my why for some of these things, I mean, at the end of the day, I know everybody says, lift for yourself and whatnot, but some of these things are performative in a sense of like powerlifting. I mean, at the end of the day, it's you're trying to push yourself to do something that is physically impressive, right? And so when I was younger, it was like, okay, 1 rep max, what's the most I can lift? And so when I think about this calisthenics, I think yes, from a physique standpoint, it can be great. It has great potential. And if I was traveling, we're going to go to the beach for a week, I'll just bring some parallettes and some rings rather than have to like necessarily go to the gym, and that's great. But ultimately, I think if I was still just only about the physique, I would kind of wonder why even bother if I have a whole gym accessible to me. I mean, there's literally like anything that I could stimulate with calisthenics, I can probably stimulate at least as well without it. There are some unique things like, like a parallel push up. I can get a really deep stretch and it feels good, and I can kind of adjust my body how I need to a little bit more than I maybe could if I was like locked into a machine or something like that. But you could also adjust with dumbbells. Like there's some small advantages here and there, but I do think if I was purely focused on the physique, it's not something I would recommend or say you need to do, for example.
Yeah. And
Go ahead.
it comes to not an all or nothing thing. When we have these conversations, it's, I just want a physique. It's so simplistic. If you want that, of course, you're going to optimize your routine with the perfect exercises, everything's stable. You're doing a ton of machines to get a lot of volume in there, push things close to failure. But for me, if I go purely bodybuilding, it it's not that fun. I need a bit of performance. I need a bit of skill. I need to accomplish something with my body, at least at the start of the session. That's why I like front loading with a little bit more technical movements, either a handstand push up or a military press, overhead press, something that does require balance and coordination. And then finishing off with more of the hypertrophy stuff.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going in there and you feel like a robot, and it doesn't take much skill to push yourself just to failure if that's all that you're doing. Now, maybe Jeff could argue against that, and I could see how you could, but you get where I'm coming from, right? You want to have a little bit of athleticism in there to tick that box of, oh, I'm getting stronger, I feel strong in my body, what I'm capable of doing. Plus, towards the end of a session, I can just stimulate close to failure so I can grow or hold on to that muscle mass as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to get at with what has intrigued me about it because there are calisthenics movements that I think are okay. They are calisthenics again, like technically a push up, right? But it's very, I mean, I guess it's a skill, but that is less what I'm interested in currently when I think of calisthenics, and it's more the skill sets that I would not have been able to do that I have to say have been very humbling. So a few things that I like try to do is like an L sit into I guess it's like a handstand, but and I don't even mean like humbling just from the skill, but where I'm like, oh, I just physically don't have the strength to do this right now, and I would have thought that I would have because I'm for my weight pretty strong, and other things like a front lever, and if you like, I'd never tried that before. The first time I did it, I just flopped down, like I just was like, whoop, just nothing. And now like I'm getting close to it. A full deep stretch into a handstand, like I guess a shoulder press, like an inverted shoulder press. Even against the wall, I'm actually shocked at how difficult that is. But to do it while bouncing, I don't know if that's like an easy thing for you to do at this point, Daniel, but I'm amazed at how difficult that actually is. So some of these things I'm like, wow, I'm really far away from that. And in a sense, it's good because it gives me several levels to still go up, you know?
There's a lot of longevity to it, and it's really is empowering, man. As you said, you try it the first time, literally can't do it. Can't keep your elbows straight in a front lever, can't even lift your feet off the ground for a press to handstand. And then you use regressions and you find a way to do the movement where you decrease leverages, you reduce some of your body weight, maybe with band assistance. And then eventually you try what you did the first time with just your body weight, your full body weight. And it's one of the best feelings. And that's where I started with this in my fitness journey by comparison to most of the conventional lifts we do in the gym. If regressed to their basic level, people can jump in and do a barbell bench press. People can't just jump in to a press to
Right,
handstand and do it
right.
straight away. This is where, for the person getting into fitness, I think this level of humility is good straight away. Because you're like, as you begin, you can't do this. You have to swallow that pride, especially as a man, and be like, okay, where do I begin this movement? And if
Yeah.
you embody that level of honesty every step of the way, plus you're trying hard, it's one of the other benefits of calisthenics.
So let me ask you, because again, I don't know like the relative strength. So can you, if you were to again go into like a parallel deep stretch and you're totally vertical, you can press into let's say a handstand. How many of like reps could you do for that, just for reference?
For a deficit handstand push-up,
Yeah, if that's
yeah, that's what it'd be called, deficit handstand push-up against the wall. Depending on rep speed, because that obviously changes everything. If
yeah,
I'm just bouncing really quick, get around 10. If I was
10. Wow.
doing slow
Okay.
and controlled, maybe 5.
Okay. Can you do it not on a wall, like just balancing?
Yeah, freestanding. Yeah. Been able
And
to do that since I was 17. So I was
wow.
early
Okay.
to the game at calisthenics.
So, okay, so now let's say for a barbell or dumbbell shoulder press, can you give me some
Mm.
reference of like a 5 to 10 rep max?
Yeah. So I've built this up recently to a overhead press with barbell, 70 kilos for sets of 3 sets of 6 at a body weight of 85 kilos.
Okay, so that's 154 pounds. You said for sets of six. You
Yes,
said 70 kilo, and then you said your body weight is how much?
85.
All right, so 187. Okay. So, and honestly, that's actually encouraging to me. So, for reference, at that similar body weight, I would probably do 155 pounds was probably I could do for maybe like 10 reps at my peak. So
Mm.
similar-ish strength there. But I mean, literally, I tried it the other day. I could not do one of the deficit, to handstand presses. I couldn't do a single one. So the fact that
Yeah.
you could do, which is really interesting because at that point, I'd think I'm balanced against the wall. So I don't know why the strength would be so different. And I literally was almost like discouraged when I tried because I was like, wow, like I'm not going to get that much stronger from a pressing standpoint was my thought. But maybe there is a
Yeah. Yeah.
skill within there that I'm just
Well,
not
the
aware of.
good thing there is you have at least the foundation level of strength in pressing. So your learning and transfer to the calisthenics will be quicker than someone who just has never done weights and they get into trying to do that
Sure.
deficit handstand push up. It's strength specificity. I think that's one of the simplest ways to tie this in. It's you get good at what you do and you don't have that much experience with overhead pressing in a calisthenics context. So it's just a matter of teaching your existing muscle mass and your neural system how to fire in that close connect chain, which is what you're doing there.
Yeah. Yeah. What I'd love to get to do, which again, this is probably basic for you at this point, would just like L sit straight into the handstand and then do a press like that just smooth movement just looks very impressive to me, which again I'm very far from that. But I can tell like okay, I'm a little closer this time, a little closer. My balance is just generally like I guess average.
Yeah.
So there's such a big balance in the core aspect to it.
Here's where you have to break down the movement more compared to conventional weightlifting. So your fast track progress would be to do handstand balance in isolation because that's a component of pressing up to the handstand. And then you'd also need to be doing your bent arm strength pressing. So you could be doing a bent arm press to handstand against the wall where you're not concerned with you press up and then you fall out of it. You're just building up the strength and the reps through that range of motion.
Yep.
And then separately, you're doing your handstand practice. So then you can marry the two eventually, where you've got enough balance, enough strength, and then you mix the balance and strength. And that's where the magic happens.
Right, right. And Jeff, I know you've done the ring stuff. Have you ever taken it to a calisthenics like skill standpoint?
Not really. The rings book that I did was entirely hypertrophy focused, and it's one of those things where I think you could make the case of, if you want to get the most muscular, gym stuff, stable stuff, machines. I mean, if you look at the top IFBB pros, basically the stuff they do, right? However, Daniel doing that stuff, him coming to my gym and mostly doing workouts with that style of training, he was better at that than me trying the calisthenic stuff. We did just like a very short, like me attempting a front lever. It was bad.
Yeah, yeah.
It was not, hopefully that footage doesn't see the light of day ever.
Don't worry, Jeff.
um,
It's right at the end of the video. Watch time. Maybe
There
20%
you
of
go.
people see that. Don't
Right,
stress.
right.
it's a treat for people who watch to the end. But I think there is something to that where, I forget who said this, but they were asked, "Oh, what sport would you have your kid do in order to transfer over to everything?" And I think gymnastics
Mhm.
was the response. Because yeah, I've heard of gymnasts deadlifting 400 or 500 pounds their first time in the gym. They had the grip strength, they had the core strength, they had the mobility, everything.
Yeah.
Whereas you take a bodybuilder who's only ever been sitting down on machines, and they just can't do a lot of stuff,
Yeah.
right? They
No,
they
no.
can't run, they can't jump, mobility is an issue, and there is something to that idea of, oh, bodybuilders get muscle bound. It's not necessarily true, but it's definitely sometimes true. And so there was a point in my training, maybe a year or two ago, where everything was stable. Everything was like the
Mm.
most stable variation, and I lost core strength. I could feel it. Like I lost the ability to. I mean, even I took out walking lunges for a while, and then I tried to put them back in. I could barely do a set of lunges with a decent weight. And I was like, all right, this is not good. Like I need to keep some of this stuff in, where on paper it might not be optimal, but it's probably best in the long term, because your body, it's not just muscle groups. It's not just, oh, I'm working this fiber. I think there is something to be said with some movements that are a little bit more holistic, or they do require some balance, which I don't have a good sense of balance. And so having some of those movements in there that, yeah, biomechanically on paper, maybe they're not stimulating any particular muscle group super, super well, but that's not all exercise is.
Yeah.
No, that was really well said, Jeff. And it comes back to, yeah, he's got it, man. He's not fully embodying the calisthenics, but you're nearly there. I'm telling you, 2026 is Jeff's calisthenics arc, if not a bit later in this year, because he's going to cut down
Well, I was gonna say
and he's
once he
going to
gets
think, man,
lean, it's gonna be
that pull up bar, that dip, it's tempting, man. And then you get a taste for it. And he's like, what's that handstand push up like? Yeah, but you get rewarded for building that foundation, really. I mean, if you're just interested in bodybuilding, do your free weight movements. We've gone so far away from them for all the major pressing patterns. If you're skipping out on doing your overhead press, you're pulling with just really stable variations, you're missing something for sure. I think it's just we've swung the other way where we know that we can stimulate a ton of tension and like push really hard to failure with the machines. But just that simple heuristic of doing your balance, skill, technique, coordination movements at the start, then finishing with the machines, it makes you so well rounded. And that's all we're doing in calisthenics. We have to get that scapular stability and the carryover to other things and the learning curve. You get rewarded for it
yeah.
if you're strong on calisthenics stuff.
Right, right. Yeah, the question about like what to get in early or what you would have your kids get in is really interesting because I think so there's multiple reasons I would be concerned about having a kid in gymnastics and wrestling because of like the weight restrictions. So obviously you have to be careful about that if you have a little kid and they're, the pressure to like be, a lot lighter than they should be. But from an athleticism standpoint and a bodily movement standpoint, I mean, I'll tell you, like, as somebody who just wrestled for a few years, I would have guys who were 50 plus pounds heavier than me, and their inability to do anything when you just throw them around, it's really comical how some of these big guys, there's just no sense of awareness. And it is common, like people, they assume I'm muscular and so therefore I'm going to be athletic or I'm muscular so I can fight or whatever that is. And it's just a completely different skill set.
No. And it comes to integrating, if your goal is building muscle, movements that can still build you hypertrophy, but are getting in range of motion stuff as well. I'm a massive fanboy of the dumbbell pullover. So if you're doing
Okay.
this exercise and you're someone who's really jacked up in the thoracic, you're really hunched over, you can't open up. Same thing with your shoulders, you can't fully flex your shoulders overhead. Think about what the pullover is doing. It's getting that thoracic extension, it's getting your arms overhead, but you're also stimulating your upper body, chest, lats, triceps, teres. So, where possible, doing these movements with range of motion embedded into them allows you to get big, muscular, increased strength, but also have that flexibility too. So you're not just moving in these really restricted ranges, which will be problematic as we get older, especially into your 30s and beyond.
Jeff, I remember you saying that down the road, you would be looking for like what that next thing was, and you were like, would it be like martial arts or this or that? And I think you said probably not
Calisthenics.
powerlifting. Well, I was gonna say, like, I could see that, because you've been successful when you were an endurance guy, and you've been successful with the bodybuilding thing. And as you get older, because you're approaching 40 now, right? So you you're gonna want to live probably a leaner life, compared to like now. I don't think you're gonna be bulking up to 230. So I could see that being like a good thing for you.
Jeff made an interesting point in one of his stories that is worth us discussing here. It's what you're currently doing now. Can you sustain that for the rest of time? And do you want to sustain that for the rest of time? Because yeah, we can train hard when we've got enough available energy and time when we're still young, but in the future we're going to have to slightly shift directions because we can't train at our peak indefinitely. It's not realistic for elite athletes. It shouldn't be realistic for people that are just training as their main hobby that they do in their life. So I've thought about that extensively too, Jeff. It's yeah, how do you get that balance of, holding on to what you've worked so hard to have, muscle, strength, proficiency in different exercises, but then also letting go of that and trying new things?
That's actually a very good tangential point too, because I was saying a little bit like that earlier, saying like, oh, now that I'm living leaner, but that is distinctly different than the aging aspect, which is tough. I mean, we've all been lifting for quite a long time. You're 15 years in at this point, Daniel, Jeff's 10, I'm 20. And it is hard to kind of, at least for me, it's been hard to say, hey, you know what? Like, I'm probably never going to do another true deadlift PR, like a one rep max deadlift PR. I'm just not going to do it again. And I'm not going to do a squat PR and bench PR. And so, that calisthenics journey, you're probably not going to be setting quote unquote calisthenics PRs when you're 70, but you can, it's a skill. There's so many different skills. And that's why I'm kind of grasping onto it right now is it's like I can keep improving in something physical that I legitimately couldn't have done, let's say a year ago or whatever. And actually, I wonder for you, Daniel, how you would approach that because you've been doing it for so long. So maybe you are going to be at a point where, hey, you've actually maxed out calisthenics. And maybe there's something, I mean, what do you think of that?
Well, that's what happened to me about 3, 4 years ago. I had been doing it since I was 17, so long into my nearly, late 20s. And I'm just thinking to myself, what's next? Do I do 140 kilo dip? Do I do 90 kilos on the pull up? It just becomes the powerlifting problem in terms of you've reached that level of unlocking a skill or getting to a level of weight lifted where you have to consider what you want out of it. And then for me, I did the reverse of what you guys may follow in terms of path. I thought to myself, okay, let's go really hard on this bodybuilding side of things. Let's do a bit of a bulk, get a bit of a surplus, do different movements instead of just my conventional calisthenics, sub in all the weightlifting stuff, barbells, dumbbells, machines, all that stuff. And it was good for me to challenge myself in a different way. But I definitely noticed that I lost those stability benefits, as Jeff said before, with how Jeff lost his coordination and balance on lunges and whatnot. When I subbed out push-ups for bench press, I noticed I lost a bit in terms of that scapular control and overall health of my shoulder girdle. It's like I got great
Hmm.
hypertrophy benefits in the upper body, but I was missing out on that kind of body mastery. So for me,
So you took the
it's never
calisthenics
going to
out
be an
actually.
Yeah, yeah. So I subbed it out. So instead of it being, 100% calisthenics, it went more, say, 60/40 in terms of 60% calisthenics, 40% weights.
Okay. And did you see, I mean, from past podcasts, something that listeners will be familiar with is I get very granular when it comes down to how we're measuring progress. So if somebody says like, well, I got bigger, but it's like, it sounds like you felt like you really responded from a hypertrophy standpoint. Was this with pictures, measurements, just kind of in the mirror? How did you assess that?
Yeah, predominantly pictures and whatnot, because I did take a follow-up DEXA scan because I
Okay.
originally got one done in 2014, which Jeff saw this VIP content in the taxi on the way to film one of our videos for YouTube. I showed him my 2014 DEXA scan, and yeah, I had like 6.5% body fat. So it was like, yeah, it was around 77 lean body mass. And then it was like 82 kilos of
Wow.
total weight. Then I took another measurement after this bodybuilding experiment. And this just goes to show why you can't put all of your weight into these type of measurements, because I put on body fat and I think I lost muscle mass, which
Okay.
didn't correlate with all of my lower body gym lifts going up, deadlift, squat. So you can imagine what that does to the untapped muscle building potential.
Sure.
And my upper body stuff was within the ballpark of where it was before.
You're saying your next DEXA supposedly said that, it was
Yeah, despite training for another 10 years consistently,
right,
I
right, right,
got
right.
fatter and smaller, apparently.
Yeah, DEXA, while DEXA, many people say is the gold standard. I mean, we've seen some very ridiculous things there. Kinobody is like one that always is brought up, right? 6% body fat, probably closer to 10. Abel Chabai, who's been on the podcast a lot, he had one that said he was like 29% body fat, like just something totally egregious. So,
Yeah.
they obviously have to be calibrated, same location, and even then, I,
For me, it was just matching up the pictures and videos with the training log. I could visually see a difference. I wish that I took measurements more diligently, but I look at measuring body parts. This is just my perspective, as that level of maybe OCD-ness that people get with tracking macros and then maybe measuring their weight every single day instead of taking averages and stuff.
you got some
So
big
for me,
measures. We're gonna throw in
I'm
stones
not
here,
going into
man.
the elite level. Yeah. But I
Jeff
know
and I
it
have a
does
lot
take
of
away a
records.
bit in these discussions where you can't be like, I had 16.5 centimeters, then now I'm, 17.1.
Sure, sure. No, no, I get it. I get it. I mean, I'm definitely an OCD kind of guy, but I see utility both ways, right? Like they all matter. The pictures, the measurements, it all I think is different things we can use to assess. You've alluded now several times to you and Jeff meeting up. Maybe we should have started with that. Do you guys want to talk about how you even connected and what happened there?
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll start that off. So I've done a couple of podcasts with Jeff over the last few years, and similar to yourself, David, just when you've got a kind of perspective that is shared similar traits or themes and values, even though we're doing separate disciplines. And it's just really fun to chat it up with someone that, embodies this stuff too. Because generally, you get the meathead who can't really articulate their thoughts, or you get the pure academic science person who, isn't actually training hard and embodying these principles. So combining all those factors and the history with Jeff, I just reached out to him, like, would you like to train for a week? I'm planning a trip to come down and shoot some content. And Jeff was like, oh, yeah, let's do it. Little did we know it was in store, because
So
Jeff can expand on that.
you flew to China then?
Yeah, so it's not too far. It's about 9 hours to get there.
Not far. Okay.
It's not coming to the States, David.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
like a,
right.
a 2 day commitment.
Right, right. Okay, Jeff, go ahead. Your side.
Yeah, no, it was a great week. It was a tough week, a lot of really hard training. And you touched on sustainability earlier. That was like the least sustainable week of training ever. Because there's a hard set, there's a working set, there's a good effort, a stimulatory set. And then a lot of the stuff we were doing was like next level. And I think it's important to go there occasionally, but it was rough, and I think you deloaded the week before, and the week after was rough as well. Like it was I mean, I'm not even sure if I've leg pressed since we leg pressed. Like I actually, I just got up the
Too
courage
much
to leg
trauma.
press again. I just got back on the leg press yesterday because like I think a little bit of trauma is going on.
It's funny you
Uh,
raised that, Jeff, because I chose that as an opportunity to sub in like leg press for hack squat, and then I changed RDLs to uh, the safety squat bar. Good morning. So I think we both intuitively came to this conclusion.
It's funny.
yeah, because I mean, I'm not going to be able to replicate that performance realistically. Like there are some movements where I think if you get like amped up and like really into it on these big, especially lower body movements, I think you can get to a level of performance that is maybe beyond what you would usually do. And so I got 15 reps for that. And I think my PR going into that was 10 or something, or might have been 8. And the 8 was like already a PR that I had just hit. So where do I go from there? Like, do I try to get 16? Do I up the weight? And so I just swapped it out. I was like, no, this is not. I'm running away from this. That was awful. I mean, the last few reps, all were super slow and grindy, and then the last rep, it literally stopped in the middle of the rep. It stopped for about 2 seconds because the sticking point is in the middle, and so I start to leg press, and then it stops, and then I keeps going, and then the fatigue is now there more, and so it was like even tough to lock out. When you're doing a bench press and you hit a sticking point in the middle and you barely get through it, but then you're so fatigued from getting through the sticking point that it's like even hard to lock out, and you get this really weird long sticking point, right? It was like that except on the leg press.
Yeah.
And so yeah, no more leg pressing for a little while after that because that was just PTSD kind of stuff. Yeah.
Jeff raises a really good point there that we should all take because you can get the same effect if you just consume social media content on fitness. You watch an inspirational video, yeah, it'll get you amped up for that one session. But really, this hot take is that it's about the sustainability. It's about pushing yourself hard consistently and what you can actually progress from. This is what Jeff and I spoke about as well. Yeah, it's great, but the recoverability from that stuff is just it's not realistic. We were doing mainly 2 sets on everything because it shows that inverse relationship between intensity and how much you can do. You
Sure.
can't do that level of effort on a leg press and then expect the same level of performance again and again after that. But also being able to reach that point made me reflect on the majority of my training and realize that I can give a little bit more consistently. I don't expect myself to go 10 out of 10 earphones in, my peaked music that gets me fired up, having 1,000 milligrams of caffeine or something. It's not realistic. But I also wish that all of us could have that monthly, like the ability to train with a friend that is actually serious. You come together each month for a leg workout, the next time a pull workout or a push workout, and it can really calibrate you to that level of effort on a more frequent basis. Because you can go a whole year with just going through the motions and kind of deluding yourself that you're working hard. And we just have to look around at people in the gym to look how opposite they are on that spectrum of intensity. We're up around a 10 more often than not because we're just obsessed about training. And then you just, in between your rest periods, you're just resenting the level of effort that everyone else is. And just like, man, I just wish you'd put in a little bit more effort.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, for sure. One of the things I thought was interesting with your channel when I saw that you were more calisthenics based is I made a video months back now, and I said, a lot of times people are, I think, unaware of how much they can determine what is going to be going in, like what stimulation they're going to get and what they're feeding essentially to their brain, right? So obviously the classic example, social media, you have the algorithm that feeds them things. But I say, if you like, for example, I was following, Nick's Strength and Power. He covers like professional bodybuilding and whatnot. It's a great channel, but I'm so far removed at this point. I was like, I don't really want this input of like IFBB pros, obviously on tons of steroids. It's just not really what I want anymore. So I just unsubscribed, nothing against like him or his channel. And so I purposely was like, you know what? I want to try to follow something like a calisthenics channel. So I first came across there was some guy like Adam Frater or something like that that I don't know, some of the content I just thought was like not great. And then I was surprised to see this whole other world of channels that I just literally was not exposed to despite being in the field for like 20 years. One that kind of surprised me was Hybrid Calisthenics. It's got like 2 million followers. Obviously, you have a massive channel. There was just like this whole other world. And so I'm curious, when you kind of set forth on the YouTube journey, did you, one, expect anything like how much you blew up? But then two, do you find that now you have to make certain like let's say calisthenics content that gets more views or that you can branch out? Like I know like if Jeff made a video on like here's the best food for longevity, that video would probably do terribly, right? Because now he's got this audience. And so I'm just curious if that's what you found too, that now you have this like huge following, but it's got to be in that niche.
If Jeff spoke about food whilst also flexing his gargantuan arm, I think anything would hit.
Right, right.
But my entry into it was just fortunate, David. I was just the early days of the internet in 2012 was more search based as opposed to algorithmic based.
Right.
So just searching out calisthenics gave me the rabbit hole of going on forums that were talking about calisthenics. Then you actually search up YouTube things like handstands, calisthenics, and you just go down that rabbit hole yourself. You have a subscription list that gives you just that content and doesn't stray too far away from that. But yeah, definitely now it's a huge part of my identity. It's the business that I offer. I like to give the restaurant analogy. I'm offering calisthenics at my menu when you come to my channel.
Right.
I can offer other things, but if I stray too far away from that course, you can't expect people to just absolutely love everything you say because we all have different interests and values. So I definitely use my page biased more towards calisthenics, but I'm also not afraid to explore other stuff that's still relevant. Range of motion, flexibility, building muscle, lifting weights, doing calisthenics, they're still within that world. And that's why I'm glad that I called the channel Fitness FAQs, not Calisthenics FAQs.
Right,
So
right.
if people don't want to watch the content, it's all free. We've all got a choice with what we watch. I respect if people don't want to watch me talking about lifting weights and they only want me for calisthenics, so be it.
How about you, Jeff? Do you find that, I mean, I know we've talked before about like if you're really lean, you get more views. Do you I haven't seen you try to veer off too much from your kind of like classic topics. Is it something that you don't do because you're still so heavily entrenched in like maximizing muscularity progress at this point, or is it because you do have concerns over how it would be taken?
No, I kind of just talk about what I want to talk about, but there are guardrails. Like it's always going to be fitness related. I'm not going to have like
The Mike Israel
geopolitical
tell
update.
talk about
Yeah, I
politics.
mean, I think that's probably the fastest way to kill your channel.
Yeah, yeah.
That's faster than not posting at all, right? If you don't post at all, then you post. That's actually not the end of the world, right? But if you start posting stuff that people are just not interested in, it's real. I've seen people do it, and it almost never ends well.
Yeah.
So if I really wanted to do a different topic, I would probably create a second channel,
Yep.
because then at least it's not impacting the main channel. Um, GVS does Manosphere or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, so it's always going to be fitness related. I don't mind doing. I wouldn't mind doing calisthenics stuff, diet stuff, response. For me, it's mostly stuff that I'm interested in, and that's the main thing. It has to be a combination of stuff that I'm interested in, stuff that people are interested in, and stuff that is going to be clickable and watchable, and stuff that can help people, I guess. So there's a few factors involved. I would say as I do more and more YouTube, I tend to prioritize stuff that I'm interested in because otherwise you just get burned out, right? Like if someone requests a video and then I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll totally do that video. More often than not, I don't film it, or if I do film it, the process of like editing it becomes, it takes a while and I'm not into it and then I get burnt out. And so it has to be something that I am interested in, but it's not just purely content for me, right? Like there are some content creators I can tell they're just selfish. Like every video is about themselves. And I think that you have to at least think about what your audience might want to watch and what could benefit them as well. And so, yeah, there's this kind of formula, I guess, algorithm. I don't calculate it out. You know, this one's a 9 for me and an 8 for the audience or anything. But I do kind of consider it. And, you know, ultimately, I think you do have to create content that is a balance, right? And the channel is my name, but it's always going to be at least somewhat fitness related. It might not always be hypertrophy, right? Like I have some powerlifter friends, they're kind of itching to get me to try to do that because they know that I progress pretty quickly, right? And they're trying to live vicariously through my gains. And I think people would be interested in that. And
Yeah, sure.
ultimately, as Daniel said, you can't make everyone happy, right? The minute you try to do that and you start trying to people please, I think people can actually sense it and they respect you less. So ultimately, if you have to transition away from some topics or maybe sprinkle in some other stuff, I think that's totally fine and probably a net positive.
Yeah, it's that delicate balance of our responsibility is to package it in the most interesting way. Because if I make a tutorial on a front lever, I've done that before. I've done that since I first started. But the way that I get pleasure from it is how do I story tell differently? Can I come at this from a different angle? Because people are coming to your channel for the calisthenics information. And that's what really keeps me interested in the game. It's how do you dive deeper, make it still relevant? How do you make it resonate with people? Different filming techniques probably have evolved me with that respect in terms of editing, camera angles, just getting better at delivering the information as well. But yeah, I do resonate with what Jeff said at large. It's just you need to talk first and foremost about what interests you. And that is really key to having the sustainability and success in being a content creator. And also integrating dogs into the content
Who we
is
got here,
the
Jeff?
easiest way to make anything fun.
Alex Bromley was on the podcast the other day, and he said something I really liked. He's like, the problem with a lot of YouTube is it's like the students are writing the syllabus, and I really like that.
Oh,
And it,
that's
it,
absolute fire of a statement. Wow.
yeah, yeah, but it's tough because it is kind of the reality. I mean, I made a video recently, and it was just like why Dr. Milo is wrong, and we just and like I've had him on the podcast, and we have good interactions, but like I just knew that video relative to my other videos was going to do well, and it did. It got like 4 times the average views because of what's talked about. Whereas there's another video I'd actually be interested to make. And as you guys said, it's a balance because I will make videos that I know won't do well, but it can be a little demotivating to be like, okay, I'm going to put more time into this because I'm interested and I'm going to put more research behind it. And it's going to get, instead of 4 times, it's going to get 1/4 of the average views. And so, to some degree, I think any content creator is placating to their audience a little bit in that, I mean, you can't just make up about nothing, right? And especially if this is your career, right? For you guys, this is primarily how you
Yeah.
make money. So it makes sense that you do that. I like what you said, Daniel, about like maybe it is the 10th front lever video I make, but I have to find a way for my own self to make it exciting, whether that's a
Yeah.
story or better camera or whatever that is.
It's a bit complacent from the content creator to just say, oh, okay, I got to do this again. No, you can do the same thing thousands of different ways. You could do it funny, you can do it serious. Like you guys know, there's an infinite number of ways to communicate anything.
Yep. One question that I had asked Jeff on our last podcast was basically if a beginner came to you and it was asking about who to follow for advice. So on that same note, I'd say to you, Daniel, if a beginner came to you and they said, "Look, like I'm interested in fitness, I do want a good physique, but I this calisthenics thing it really resonates with me. I'm looking at what you're doing. You're doing 10, inverted handstands and whatnot. what can I do for the first 6 months? Like, what is a good that after 6 months, I'm gonna feel like this is actually impressive, and I didn't think I'd be able to get there. Where's like a starting point for that?
Keeping it really basic and simple. I know for people it can be really overwhelming. You look online, everyone's got a different opinion, perspective, and strategy for how you should work out. But it is really making the effort to learn the principles that underpin everything. Methods are many. We've all got our own unique take on how to combine things and structure things. But we know progressive overload, we know specificity, we know the recovery rate of muscles, is generally 24 to 48 hours after a workout. All these things allow you to structure your week to get something that resembles what any decent coach would give someone if it was a, bespoke plan that was given. And for calisthenics, that'd be just getting your basics up, push-ups, pull-ups, dips, those movements that can be progressed up to a certain point. Say you can do 30 push-ups, 15 to 20 pull-ups, 20 plus dips. Then you can introduce weight to those exercises, and then you can just keep scaling that, playing with moderate to high reps with just your body weight. Then you can also do weighted calisthenics as well. Getting that foundation first and foremost is going to make the learning curve for the skill stuff much easier because you got the foundation of muscle mass, strength, and just scapular control in your upper body. Whereas if you try and, okay, I want to do calisthenics, I heard it's good to do weighted calisthenics, so you're doing that. Then you're also throwing in handstands and handstand push-ups and front levers and all these things. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes people make is just they bite off more than they can chew and their progress is really slow for obvious reasons.
You run into, and I alluded to this at the start of the podcast, I have for sure noticed a little bit more frequent orthopedic issues, and maybe I started a little bit too quickly. I'm fortunate that I've not really had elbow or knee or shoulder issues in my life with all the lifting I've done, but I have recently, I was waking up in the middle of the night and I was like, man, my elbows were just really
Yeah.
sore. And I don't know if it's more from going super deep or if it's from these front levers where I'm at full extension. Some back like tingling going on, some things where I was just like, okay, again, am I pushing? I've always kind of had blockier abs, so I went from essentially no core work to now like all of this stuff. So again, maybe it was a little bit too
Hollow body
quick.
holds all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just curious if you either personally or clients or whatever, if you come across people compared to let's say bodybuilding where you can just work around cables and anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
more
Yeah.
orthopedic issues, especially as a
Oh,
PT yourself.
it's definitely a factor because we know that there's a mismatch between tendon and joint recovery taking longer as opposed to the more acute muscle recovery that happens after a workout. And this is where people get excited and they start having an increased frequency or jumping up their progressive overload too quickly because their muscles aren't sore. Oh, yeah, I'm ready to do that. But these straight arm exercises, it's a ton of pressure on your joints and tendons. And especially if you're doing more plyometric based calisthenic movements, say you're throwing in muscle ups or you're doing weighted pull ups where you're trying to increase your performance, you're using a ton of stretch reflex. Of course, it's a lot of stress through those areas combined with people not having sufficient variety in their movements also contributes to tendon related issues and stuff. So it's a aggressive overload. It's doing repetitive movement patterns too often. And it is also can be technique specific on dynamic exercises, doing them a bit too plyometrically. And the way that I compare this is we know that steroid users, they have accelerated progress. So they get strong really quickly. What do they get? A lot of pec tears, bicep tears, because there's that mismatch between recovery and joint tendon health. That happens in a sense in calisthenics if we don't respect it, because we need those 3-ish months for that tendon recovery and adaptation to those exercises, even when they feel easy. And that's the different mindset that people have to get into because they feel fresh, but then there's this niggle that they're having with their joints and tendons, and they don't understand that it's that patience that allows you to build up your load tolerance and actually uh, be able to tolerate what you're doing.
Yeah, and again, that's something I think I have obviously now experienced and had to, get humbled, and hopefully it's not a long-term thing. Hopefully I can just kind of ease back into it because it's something again, not just from this discussion, but for the reasons we mentioned, it's something that I hope I can do for a long time. There is an excitement to having these things, and I think it also, again, not that you want to just be performative for general population, but I think it is impressive to the average person when they see that you can do some of these calisthenic skills that they might like, if you're hammer strength pressing some like random number, it's just kind of like a nothing. It doesn't
Yeah.
mean it. Some of these calisthenic skills, I mean, I think many of us can relate to like maybe you're in high school and you're seeing these videos online of these people doing these things in parks and you're like, wow, that looks really impressive. And the old lean jack guy who can still do some very impressive skills, I think is kind of like a good arc.
Yeah, I must comment on the difference I've noticed in terms of people coming up to me when I was more into bodybuilding. I'd still get people coming up saying, "Hey man, nice physique. What do you do for X, Y, and Z body part? Have a chat." And it happened every now and then. Whereas when I'm doing calisthenics in public, it's almost every workout, there's someone that comes up, "Hey man, were you a gymnast? Hey man, did you get your physique with only calisthenics?" And if you were to compare my build to a bodybuilder's build, now that we've got the bias of social media, there's tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of people that look within the ballpark of myself, yourself, David, and Jeff. But if you have a slightly above average physique with doing just some basic calisthenics, it's this combination which, upon reflection, I think has allowed me to have some level of success because it is impressive to see someone 6 foot doing these type of movements because it breaks down stereotypes. People think, oh yeah, this is looks like a gymnast type of thing. Gymnasts are usually 5'5" and they've got jacked upper bodies, but nothing else going down. It's this celebration of strength and having the aesthetics, which is a combination for me that I have enjoyed since day one.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, cool guys. So I am a little past my bedtime, my old man status here, so I do have to wrap this one up. But I very much appreciate both of you guys being accommodating with the times and that we could all get together for this. So thank you guys, and let's tell everybody where they can find you. Why don't we start with Jeff?
Yeah, so Jeffrey Verity Schofield, I think on Instagram and YouTube, and then verityfit.com for all my books.
So
Fitness
Daniel.
FAQs on all social media platforms. And if you want to start this calisthenics journey, fitnessfaqs.com for programs to demystify the process of progress.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys.
Appreciate you, David. Thanks, man.